So with everything, get references beforehand and real world references like this, and then you can have non-real world references like so. Cool. And let's get some very much non-real world reference like this.
That's real.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Cool. How do you move up?
Exactly.
Okay, I like this. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's super important just to get references beforehand, like we talked about. Otherwise, you just have no idea what you're going to be sculpting. If you're going to be doing an orc, well, you can't just be doing an orc. You can't just be sculpting from a sphere. You got to base it on something. In this case, we're going to be using a gorilla for this, and I'll do some sculpting, and Morten can do some nice commentary.
So here Henning is starting from a sphere. What are your thoughts about this sphere?
It's a pretty good sphere.
No, but reference is the key. I know we keep repeating this, but it's because so many people they tend to forget about it. I see so many posts like you see on Facebook and ArtStation and stuff, and people they post with pride. They're like, oh, I made this painting in 2 hours and I didn't use any reference. Like, yeah, that's why it looks like shit. You know, that's often the case. Like, you will have elements in your paintings, in your sculptures, whatever you're doing, that doesn't look right because you didn't use reference. I hate this like elitist mentality of you should be able to do everything without reference. That's bullshit. Like, you're an artist and you are here to create awesome stuff, and whatever tools you can utilize to create awesome stuff, use it. I had a friend of mine who he wanted to do texturing, but he refused to use, like, this is how extreme he was. He refused to use references online, photographies and stuff like that, because it was cheating. So what he would do is he would color, like watercolor paint stuff to make like grunge maps. Then he would take pictures of that, scan it, and then he would use that in Mari. That's it, because then it wasn't cheating anymore.
Cool.
Instead of just finding a picture of like some grunge or like a sidewalk online, grading it a little bit, and then throwing it in Mari. That's of course an extreme case, but I think a lot of people, they have this mentality that you shouldn't use reference because then you're not as good as an artist. I think there's definitely something to be said for doing exercises without reference.
Yes.
Where maybe you do, like we've talked about the horse example before, where you go like, okay, let me try and draw a horse or sculpt a horse, like from memory, to see how far do I actually get. You sculpt the horse and you go like, this looks weird. Then you look at a horse, you figure out, okay, where are all the things that I still don't understand about the horse? You go back, you do the study again without reference, and then maybe afterwards you do it with reference. So it's like, it's just trying to build that mental dictionary in your brain of how do things actually look.
Yeah.
You have to find the gaps.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then you're trying, then you're observing, then you learn to observe again.
Yeah.
We had somebody who was talking about like, how do you sculpt, like with this case, how do you sculpt a lion or something? Well, you start off with like a blob of clay, then you remove everything which doesn't look like a lion. I'm not really sure how to use that for an academic teaching or something, but I just think it's an awesome saying. So whenever I'm starting to sculpt like this, it's gonna look pretty weird for quite some time. But this is the stage. Now we're like 2 minutes into it or something. But it's the stage where you're just blocking it in. You're starting with skeleton, and you truly start with a skeleton in this case, not some kind of just an indication or something. I'm actually truly starting with a skeleton, and I'm observing what's going on. I'm trying to get into good plane changes, because if you start with something like the eye beforehand, well, where is the eye? I don't know. I know where it is now because it's kind of where in the eye hole. But if you don't have an eye hole, if you don't have a cavity for the eye, where can you put it? You just don't know.
So again, start with bony landmarks. In this case, start with the skull. Bony landmarks, and then, work your way from the inside and out.
Yeah. Where's the nose here? Well, there's a hole right here. It's probably around here somewhere.
The nose hole?
The nose hole?
Yeah.
As is known in the literature.
It's like if you looked at the reference before, it was kind of like going back to what we did with the lion as well. You look at the reference, the left one, the desaturated gray one.
This
like,
one?
Yeah, how much, obviously his tusks are super exaggerated, right? But how much they define the face is the same thing with the lion. Instead of like, you look at an orc, you look at the orc below the shitty Warcraft art down there, how it's just like a round mouth, right? It doesn't look like that. But the more, defined mouth with the tusk, where it gets this sort of like jaw, like rectangular kind of lip, that's the kind of feel you would go for. So this is all inferred from the skull, from the bony landmarks. Everything that's underneath. If you just started sculpting and didn't take the skull and the tusks into consideration from the beginning, you'd end up with kind of like this round mouth from the green orc.
From one of the best games ever made, Warcraft 3.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. It was great in early 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
Well, also when it comes to anatomy as well, it's so much easier to have the bony landmarks, because muscles, they just connect from one point to another. So let's say we have the clavicles down here, and you want this nice muscle, the Sternocleidomastoid. Well, if you want to know where that goes, it just goes from a point on the back here, straight line down, and now you kind of have the Sternocleidomastoid. Same with all the other muscles as well. They just kind of go from one point to another, and the only thing they're doing is they're just contracting and expanding.
Yeah, you don't really have wavy muscles.
No.
A muscle would be terrible if it went like this.
Yeah.
A muscle just serves one purpose, and is to contract.
Yeah.
It can do one thing.
It's a rope from one point to another, which gets shorter.
Yeah. Obviously, you can have a more relaxed muscle, like the sternocleidomastoid or the pecs, when they lie on top of other muscles, or like the rib cage, or the rest of the neck. Yes, when they're not flexed, then they tend to be like a round muscle belly. But as soon as you start activating them, like especially, I love, like, the sternocleidomastoid is like my favorite muscle on the entire body. It's like when you rotate
we have
your
that.
it's just everyone has it, and it's awesome. So when you rotate your head, you'll have the activating side of the sternocleidomastoid going down to your clavicle, and it's like this little point that starts to activate down here. It's a straight line. I don't know if you can see it. Like, it's a straight line from here going up to behind my ear. That's what happens when you activate a muscle. It's just straight.
Okay, so our base is super tight and could not use any more refinement whatsoever.
That's perfect.
Oh, good. So what I'll do at this point is let's start to get in some eyes. Like we can throw in some eyeballs, because I don't know where I don't know the shape of them. So just do a sphere 3D, append it. Nice. I can probably use this from teeth later as well, so I'm just going to put it there, duplicate it, and then hide it, and then scale this down, and just move it in. Make sure symmetry is off, otherwise it's going to go crazy. Cool.
Yeah, and like if you don't have the sphere in here, and if you don't have the skull, it's going to be so much harder for you to figure out where do the lids actually sit. Now that you have a volume, of the eyeball that you can actually define the lids around, it's a lot easier, because then you can sort of just trace around the eyeball.
Yeah. Ta-da!
Also, a nice feature of ZBrush is that it kind of masks the geometry that's underneath whatever subtools are there. So if you're sculpting with the sphere on, it sort of masks whatever's underneath the sphere, helps to build up the volume a little better.
So you can see I'm just conforming it to the actual eyeball which is there. And this is where you got to figure out what was said before. Should this be, what did you want it to feel like? Drowsy orc? Angry orc. And of course he's an orc. He's always angry.
Oh, I thought you were going to say drowsy.
No, he's
50-50.
Yeah, it's 50-50. Nice. Professional sculptor, 2018. Trust me.
There's always this weird stage you go through when you're sculpting.
Yeah.
We still get it, like where
Like
you
this.
feel like you're absolute garbage, and I think that happens for like 90% of the sculpting process. So it's weird. It's a weird profession to choose, where you go like, oh no, I have lost my ability to sculpt. I'll never get it back again. And then like 4 hours later, oh thank God, it looks okay. It looks okay.
Yeah. Oh, that was it. Oh, I didn't lose it after all. Every single time. I don't know how I'm this insecure every single sculpt I'm doing, but every single sculpt you're like, oh man, that was it.
How will this ever work out?
Yeah, you've been working for like 4 years in feature film, and you're like, one day they're gonna figure out that I don't know how to sculpt. On the 32nd character. That's the one I'm gonna screw up.
But there is also something to be said, like if you're really stuck when you're doing this kind of designing, like at some point you just gotta scrap it.
Yeah.
You just gotta go, okay, I've been sitting with this all day. It's really not moving forward. So it's probably better to start from scratch. Or at least, go back to an earlier stage where you know your sculpt is working.
This is one of these things, again, people forget real world exists. They're like, my model looks so weird. Yeah, you don't have ears. It's so weird that it doesn't look right. Yeah. So weird.
I was doing I was using a bust of my grandpa, and I had references, pictures. I set it up properly, and I've been sculpting on it for about 2 months. And all the measurements I had taken, everything looked right. It just didn't feel like my grandpa. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh shit, he doesn't have eyebrows, and he doesn't have his beard. My grandpa, he has this very defined beard, and it's very big bushy eyebrows. As soon as I put those in, it was like, okay, instant grandpa right there. But it's just we're so focused on the form of the face, matching everything. Okay, the cheekbones are there. This is his forehead. This is how his chin looks. But most of the time, unless you're really blonde, then facial hair is going to be such a big part of what happens here. It's going to define your face to a really big extent. And every time you express something, any kind of emotion, your eyebrows move, right? And your eyebrows sort of they help form your face. It's the same if you're wearing glasses. People without glasses, or people who take their glasses off that you've looked at for years with glasses, all of a sudden have an alien face.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So weird. Getting there. Yeah.
Help to give him a pair of ears and a nose. Turns out. It's also really hard to sculpt this kind of stuff from scratch, because normally the way you do this, you don't just kind of wing it like this, like crazy. You sit down and you just work all the shapes through. You make sure you go into the silhouette view and you make sure that everything is working properly, and you just properly go through it. For this demo, we are gonna blaze through it and just hope that this is gonna look cool in the end.
Most of the time you start off from a base mesh in production.
Yeah.
100% of the time, maybe, opposed to that. Unless you're doing some specific creature, then you'll most likely not. But any sort of humanoid creature, because you can stretch topology really far and it will still deform properly. You'll start out from a base mesh.
There's absolutely no shame at all in starting from a base mesh. Also, that means you might not have to retopologize it after, and it's just a lot easier.
I think it's definitely a good exercise to start out from. You start out from a sphere, you start out from a general blob, but
like this.
It's a good exercise because starting from a base mesh, the hard part of the job is done. Your silhouette, the big forms,
proportion.
That is the tricky part. Anything that's in here gets a lot easier and easier. With the high-res details of alphas, plastering alphas all over your model is super easy. Of course you can do it and it still looks bad, but the main forms, the silhouette, that's really the tricky part. So starting from base mesh can help you, get there. That's why exercises without a base mesh is really good, especially in the beginning. Yes.
Regarding the base mesh, say that you're doing a sculpt and you're starting from one, is that something you will have created yourself, or do people share base
Whatever.
meshes?
Yeah. You don't need to. I mean, it's nice to create a base mesh yourself because you get the experience of doing the topology. So that's nice. I have a few base meshes that I've created, but most of the base meshes I use now is stuff I've taken from someone else. So
just steal.
Steal as much as you can.
Yeah. There's no honor. We actually just got a base mesh a few weeks ago on FlippedNormals as well, which is really good.
Is that allowed out for a couple of years?
What's that?
Yeah, I mean it's paid. You buy it, and it's not a free one. It's made by Vincent
Menier.
He worked for CCP Games, so he did a base mesh, and it's really, really cool. I think his issue was that he was scouring a lot of. He was going on Gumroad, on ZBrush. He was trying to find a good solid base mesh for faces, but all of the ones that he found in terms of both UVs and the layout of the topology just weren't cutting it. So he sat down for a few weeks or a month or so.
A long time.
Yeah, and really tried to perfect one. So having something as solid as that is obviously the best you can have. But any base mesh when you're doing sculpting like this, that has the form, not necessarily the topology, is a good starting point.
If you do have to project something, say that you start like this,
Mhm.
Do you recommend a specific method?
Whatever software you feel comfortable with. Most people use Maya, QuadDraw in Maya. We have a bunch of free videos on our channel about retopology as well. So there's a lot of stuff to
And we
check
just
out.
did like 2 weeks ago. We came up with a whole series as well, showing
Yeah.
how to take a full character through it. You basically just block out the loops in with QuadDraw in Maya. But yeah, like Morten said, whatever tool works.
It's the same thing as sculpting. You start out from very, very general, like big shapes, to something very specific. It was something we saw with the students as well a couple of weeks ago, was that as soon as they start doing retopology, start going granular too fast. They're like, okay, I want to define the muscles here. No, like you just block out the entire arm with like 8 sides, that's one cylinder, and then you start dividing it. Don't focus on the muscles, don't focus on any of that.
Yeah, and retopology is still something you're going to do a fair bit, particularly if you're a student and you're going to do it for a film
Yeah.
or your own portfolio, whatever it is.
Oh yeah, and that's actually a question we've gotten quite a lot in terms of like when you're presenting stuff in your portfolio, if you want to apply as a modeler, should you show wireframes? Yeah, 100%, most definitely, because, you know,
You're a modeler.
You're a modeler, so. It's like if you were presenting a texturing reel and all your models were untextured. Having an effects reel with no effects. Yeah.
Yeah, show wireframe.
Yeah, wireframes are important. And you had a question before as well in terms of like hireability, like what makes you most attractive to companies. It's like if, let's say, you're applying for a modeling position and you really want to do character art, like being a character artist is not an entry-level position.
No.
It's not something you'll be doing right off the bat unless you are like a Bernini level of sculpting and designing. Then yeah, sure, but like one person is that. So most people will start out doing something else. I started out doing environments. Well, actually, I started out doing architectural visualization. Then I started doing environments, and then I moved up to characters after that. So it's just trying to create a diverse portfolio that shows that you can handle a lot of tasks.
Yeah.
Whether this is modeling or it's texturing or it's concepting, especially like if you do concept art and you want to get hired as a concept artist, don't just do like sci-fi weapons. You know, you want to do everything else. You want to make crates. You want to make chairs. You want to make characters. Everything that shows that you are a diverse artist, whether it's for effects, modeling, texturing, or concepting.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Yeah.
I have no quarrels with that.
All right, we're starting to get some form in there now.
Yeah, he is a very angry, or maybe he's not even angry, maybe he's just disappointed.
I think he's disappointed.
He's just disappointed.
His son came home and
Yeah.
he's like, oh, no, not again.
He wrecked his new car. I hate when it happens.
I think that the son was he just came home. We can go with the car one. That works.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's edit that out, but there are real people here.
Edit the people out.
Gotta have live audience.
I'm assuming you're getting to the tusks now.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's such an important part of, like we just talked about, how it defines the entire face. You know, for an orc, it would be tusks.
Yeah.
For someone with glasses, it would be glasses.
Yeah.
It's his tusk. His glasses are tusks.
Wisdom from Morten.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's super important that you get it in.
Yeah.
And also, like, depending on what you want to feel like, you should model them accordingly. If you want this to feel like the biggest, baddest dude, you might make them really big and sharp. But maybe if it's a bit older, maybe they're a bit ground up.
I mean, there's a reason you always have design stereotypes, whether you hate them or like them. It's like you watch any anime and like the smart kid is always the one with the glasses. You're like, Jesus Christ, not again. But it's like there's a reason this happens.
It reads.
It reads really quickly, and most of the time when something is on screen, you need it to read quickly.
Yeah.
If you're in any sort of concepting position when you're doing film, the amount of creative freedom you have is very limited, and I think it's good to learn early on to detach yourself from the work that you're doing. Otherwise, your feelings will be hurt, and it will be very hard for you to work in this industry. You know, when someone comes and gives you feedback on a design, let's say you're doing a creature, they go like, I don't like this, I think we should change it to this. It's not up to you to be personally invested, you know, to improve the story by making sure your creature has like an awesome backstory and stuff. It's like whatever the studio wants.
They're paying you to make an orc.
Yeah, they're not paying you to do personal work.
No.
They're paying you to, you know, create their idea, basically. Man, the Tusk on the references, they're huge.
Yeah, I think he's the bad dude from the movie.
Ah, okay.
I had a feeling, yeah. He looks a bit bad.
I watched it, but I don't remember.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Nobody should ever watch Warcraft movie.
It's pretty bad.
It's awful. You should watch this image because it's awesome, but don't go further.
I mean, the
than that.
orcs in it were amazing. The weird
Yes.
thing was like this mix of realism and orcs and stuff. It was
Yeah.
weird. Yeah.
So this sculpt, could it be animated? Like you've sculpted it with its like mouth shut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a complete like newbie, so I don't know everything. Like, can you like open its mouth and make it like talk, or not after like sculpting it, or do you have to build it with something else? And then
Yeah, so the process would be you do this kind of concept sculpt. Let's say you don't have a base mesh to start from. You do this kind of concept sculpt, and right now its mouth is closed. You do the concept sculpt, and then you would take it into something like Maya. Then you would start retopology, you know, lay out your mesh how you want it to be, and then you would probably manually model the inside of the mouth afterwards. So it's like, then you make it possible to have its mouth open. In its current form, no, definitely not.
Yeah, this is purely like doing a clay sculpture. Like, yeah, this is a clay sculpture versus an animatronic. You can't use this for anything directly, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's just a design. We're just trying to figure out what the design is. It's trying to look like something.
We're getting there.
Mr. Generic Orc.
But again, like you can see the way Henning he defined the skull, the shape of the skull and the cheekbones from before, the eye holes.
The eye holes.
You know, that is still there. That's what we're basing everything around. So like right now, it's like if you imagine this as a coloring book, right? The outlines and everything in the coloring book is the hard thing because then you're putting down the concept. Coloring everything inside the lines is not hard.
No.
Unless you're 5. Then it's
That is pretty tricky.
That's pretty tricky.
We're not making fun of you if you actually have a hard time. It's
And-
also like a process where you just gotta review it. You just gotta look at it and be like, huh. Review the silhouette, look at the silhouette, and looking at it, realizing that it's a bit boring, a bit bland, and just working through the silhouette. Super important.
I think one thing I want to reiterate is that what we're doing now is pretty fast, and you know we get up to a decent level pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But none of this is easy. It gets easier, but yeah, we've been doing this for I don't
A
know,
long time now.
10, 12 years or something
Yeah.
like that. So it's like it's not because it's easy. It's just because there's 10 years of practice behind it. You know, so don't get discouraged.
No. Whenever I'm doing this as well, normally I have a mirror, and you're just going like, "Argh."
Yeah.
And you're looking super angry. Which is always good fun.
Mirrors are very underrated when sculpting.
Yeah, there. Now I'll just subdivide it up a bit as well, because I just feel I just need a bit more sharpness to this. So just so I can go in and just add a bit more resolution to stuff. Bit more
And that's
definition.
also a very general question we get. When do you subdivide? Whenever you want.
How heavy is a rock?
Yeah.
1?
A stone? I don't know. What is a stone?
I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on the model. It's like we talked about before, trying to push your model to the limit in terms of what this level of detail can support. Once you can't have any more detail in there, like now Henning is starting some more of the wrinkles, defining the eyelids, that kind of stuff. That's detail that would be very hard to define in the previous subdivision level. So that's when you go up.
Yeah. And I'm just working over the form as well. Like there was a question before, like when do you, like it's very intimidating going from like clean shapes to like dirty shapes or like mid-frequency.
Dirty shapes.
Dirty shapes. It's just, I just work over the shapes. Work over every single part of it, apart from the back of the head because I don't care. But all other parts, it's like you just work it up. You're going through with like some more wrinkles and working this up. This is where it would be really handy if I had some proper reference, or rather a mirror, because then I would just go like, "Arr."
Yeah, the problem when doing a human-like face, well, it's a human face with big teeth,
Yeah.
is that generally you'll have one pose or you'll have a couple images that you're basing stuff off. But when you have a mirror, you can start to play with your own expressions, and you can see how everything in your face deforms. You know, where does skin start to bunch up, which muscles start to pull where on the face. So that's why a mirror is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, this here is basically 100% a human face, just with different proportions.
Yeah.
There is nothing unique about this per se. If you can sculpt a human face, you can sculpt this. If you can't sculpt a human face, you can't sculpt this. It's all based on the same anatomy. Getting some angry lines because he's angry.
Angry lines.
Some angry lines.
Yeah.
So you can definitely tell that we know our anatomy.
But that's the thing, I think, especially in the beginning when you start doing anatomy, it's very easy to get distracted by
Angry lines.
angry lines and terminology.
Yeah.
Because the technical parts of anatomy are easy to learn. Like, it's easy to memorize all the 600 names of the muscles, sure. It just takes a while.
Yeah.
But in terms of interpreting that and putting it onto form, especially once your body starts to move, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
So sometimes you see students who have impeccable knowledge of anatomy, and they can name every single muscle, insertion points, everything, but they can't actually sculpt it.
It's like a doctor. Hopefully a doctor knows more of anatomy than you do, but you wouldn't trust him with a creature sculpt.
No.
They're two very different things. I also know people who, they are fantastic sculptors, but they have no knowledge of the names or anything. You're like, the sternocleidomastoid is better. And they were like, the what? The neck muscle. Ah, cool. So it's not that you have to know it. It's just helpful.
Yeah, like what it gives you learning the general surface anatomy names, I would go. Like, you don't need to know everything, just like 20 or 50. It's like,
Yeah.
it allows you to speak the language. Like, you can communicate what kind of muscle you want to focus on. Let's say the sternocleidomastoid, instead of going the neck muscle. Well, which one of the neck muscles? You know,
Yeah.
that's where it's helpful.
The way I like to think about it as a simplification is it's kind of like a map where you can know a city really well just because you lived there for a long time. So you can have an intuition about how the map is like. But if it comes to giving direction to somebody else, you can't be like, it's next to the big church. Like, cool. Where's the big church? But if you know anatomy names, you can just be specific about that. But you can totally know the lay of the land. You can totally know the terrain without knowing the names, and vice versa. But ultimately, what's important is not to know all the names. Ultimately, what's important is to know the function of them and general the volumes of them. We're just working over all the shapes now, refining.
And there was a question before in terms of, like, you know, balancing. I think you asking like balancing life with school and personal projects and all that kind of stuff, which is super tricky. But one thing that I really want to emphasize, especially for people in university, which I see a lot, is that they just do the school assignments and that's it. And they think that the kind of education that you get when you're doing this is a practical education. You're going to be hired on your skills. Some of it, who you are as a person, but most of it is your skills. Are you able to produce what you need to produce? You're not going to get there if you just go to school and you just do the 1 or 2 assignments that you have, and you have your written assignments. All your theory, all the written assignments aren't going to help you at all. No one cares about your grades. No one cares about that you actually went to university. Yes, it might help with a visa. It might help with permanent residence somewhere else. But what matters is what you're able to produce. And a lot of that stuff comes from you doing self-exploration, you trying to problem solve on your own outside of school hours, like going beyond what the school assignment just says. That's where people start to shine and where they get really good. Because there are a lot of people that try to enter the industry after they graduate, and we've talked to a bunch of students that do this. They do that 3 years or whatever, how long it is, and then they're surprised by the level of artists that actually get entry-level positions. It's a lot higher than they expected. So a lot of people, they get frustrated because they just spent 3 years, pouring in what they thought was enough time to becoming a certain level of artist, but is nowhere near where you need to be. So starting to, understand that is the reality of how this industry works, I would really encourage anyone who only does school assignments to reconsider and start doing more personal projects. It is tricky trying to balance this out with, you also want to have a life, you don't want to, destroy your body. So it's definitely a tricky balance, but you have those 3 years in university or however long you have left, and you want to try and get the most out of that and dedicate your time to becoming a better artist, I think.
It's pretty fierce competition out there.
Yeah.
And school assignments by themselves aren't gonna cut it. So he's starting to get there now. Just working over all the shapes. You can kind of see what kind of gave him some mid-frequency into this. Just a bit of like these kind of things. This mid-frequency is just unrefined. So you still see like the general shapes. You just have tons of brush strokes. And then the next step would be to go over everything, and maybe with a higher subdivision level, and to just squeeze, just to refine everything more. But I think we can squeeze a bit more out of this level. And when I'm doing this, it's fairly big, broad strokes. I'm not so much going in with like tiny ones. It's just big, broad strokes just to define where I want volume. And this is honestly really hard for me to do. This is tricky to do stuff live, and you got to think about a lot of different things at the same time. That's why we chose an orc. Because, oh no. Because if you try to do like a realistic human with this, then you have so many more things you got to work with. Now it's like if you move the eyes a bit up or down, you're like, it's a design thing. But if you're doing a realistic human, you can't just move the eyes 30 centimeters up or down.
That's the nice thing about creature modeling and creature sculpting, is that you can be a little more creative with your proportions, and it'll still look fine.
Yeah.
Once you start getting into portraiture and busts and stuff like that, if you want to recreate a person, you're talking about subtleties that are so small for a person to not look like a person. Like, I've worked with digidoubles before. So digidouble is just a scan of an actor that we have to recreate for film. So we get a scan in of the actor, and once you start looking at scan data, you realize how lopsided everyone is. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I've sat with scans of Jennifer Lawrence, Chris Hemsworth, Johnny Depp, and you look at their faces and you're just like, whoop. One of the most lopsided is probably Tom Cruise. What's the James Bond right now? Who's James Bond
Daniel
right now?
Craig.
Daniel Craig. They are just broken. Their faces are just... But
don't tell them we told them that.
We're recording this crap.
Daniel Craig, if you're listening.
But that's the problem. You don't see that when you're using reference you find online. Like, if you're trying to do like a likeness sculpt or something. First of all, they're all taken with different focal lengths of the camera, so the depth of the face changes quite a lot, but you don't see the asymmetry that much. Yeah, you might see Daniel Craig, he has a broken nose a little bit, but that's about it. But once you get the scan data of an actor, you start to realize that it's just like, it's all out of whack. So if you symmetrize them and make both sides of the face the same, all of a sudden it doesn't look like the actor anymore. Because you're so trained to look at their faces. You've seen their faces on screen so many times. So once you start, if you symmetrize and make them completely symmetrical, all of a sudden it's a different person. So trying to understand that, and then when you're sculpting, having an asymmetry pass, and that's where looking at reference and truly observing your reference is really going to benefit you. I can't really remember where I started with this, but
I think you were hating on James Bond.
James Bond's great.
Yeah, and like this model here, this is a CG model. This is why it's terrible for as a real world reference, because the asymmetry. Whoa, a scar, super cool. The real world asymmetry in real things is that like one eye is just higher up than the other, and we'll actually do that in a little bit. But asymmetry is not. Oh, you have a little scar. Cool. No. It is if you're doing a CG character, because then you really just can't go too crazy with it. Because then you have production issues.
Yeah.
And that's a world of pain.
Yeah, for production you want to keep everything symmetrical for as long as you can. Until you're done with retopology or you've projected everything to your base mesh, everything needs to be symmetrical. Yeah. After that, you can do an asymmetry pass.
Yeah.
It also, like, if you're doing personal projects, that's also how I would suggest that you do it. It just speeds up your entire workflow a lot. Like,
Yeah.
the longer you can stay in symmetry, the better. There is something to be said for doing exercises completely asymmetrical.
I love doing those. They're so much fun.
They just take twice as long. So, but
Yeah, kind of
it's
by
an-
nature.
It's an excellent exercise.
Yeah.
So what kind of orc is this? Is he like the slave orc, or is he like
He's the grandpa orc.
he's the grandpa?
Yeah,
orc?
he's the grandpa orc. He's a very nice man.
Oh, okay, he's a nice man.
Yeah, he's a
Right.
nice man. He it's not his fault that he has giant teeth in his face.
Right. Okay.
I think it's time for some asymmetry pretty soon.
Nice.
Nice. Just gonna refine his eye a bit more. Look at those friendly eyes. One thing which helps a lot is to sculpt in some what's it called, like the iris and maybe like a little pupil, just because you just get a bit more personality to it. Compare this to like this.
Yeah. It's the same thing about eyebrows and hair.
Yeah.
Like, this really defines a lot of characters. Also because, like, you know, if a person has brown eyes or if they have blue eyes, that actually changes how their face looks quite dramatically.
Yeah.
Like, if you go in Photoshop and try to like hue shift and do a little bit of light shifting to people's eyes, that's gonna change their face dramatically. Maybe not dramatically. Slightly. Slightly dramatically.
Okay, let's make him a bit more sad. And the way you make somebody sad, you do this to your eyes.
Aww.
This dog was just run over.
That's actually something I think it took a while for that to register. The heaviness of the brows is something that people actually tend to forget as well. That's again back to gravity and skin. Like, for some people, like for me, for example, I have a lot heavier brows, so my eyelids aren't as defined. Some people have super defined eyelids, but as you get older, this part just on the brow, between the eyelid and the brow, starts to sag a lot more,
Yeah.
and that's how you look sad or tired.
Yeah, so Morton looks really, really sad all the time.
And tired.
Sorry. Yeah, like really, really look at this line, which just
Yeah.
falls over it. So sad. Okay, let's screw him up. Let's add the asymmetry to him. This is gonna be like the last 10 minutes or so of it. This is where I'm just kind of going in and just kind of moving stuff around. You can do this on a lower subdivision level, just a bit better performance.
Now both of his dogs are dead.
Yeah.
So now he's really sad.
You just get a lot more variation from it. Maybe he was hit in the head a lot, so he has like a little... He's an orc, you know, he's been in battle.
But he's a grandpa orc.
Yeah, well, he hasn't always been a grandpa.
He's really been hit in the head. It's one of those, like, you see on TV, it's like, oh, he was shot in the head but somehow survived.
Yeah. Yeah, this is this guy. Yeah.
I don't yeah.
Morton.
I mean, whatever you want to do, whatever you
We're
want.
going with this.
Yeah. I guess. Your sculpt.
Is this a little secret compartment?
Oh, that'd be great for smuggling stuff.
Yeah, nobody would think about that. He just has a little skull cap.
That gets to the airport, sir, could you remove your... I have a hole in the head.
Teeth as well. Let's
Mm.
make those. Okay, so this guy is definitely like... He's been in some heavy weather.
Teeth are typically very asymmetrical as well.
Yeah.
You don't see that a lot because most of the time when you're doing any kind of sculpts, people close their mouths.
Yeah.
But teeth tend to be pretty asymmetrical. Especially like the lower part of your teeth. Those always get them messed up. Like, you know, front teeth, usually okay. But this part down here, not so good.
Very specifically.
Yeah. It's like there's not enough room in your jaw for those teeth.
It just helps so much just to break this kind of stuff up and adding a little smuggling compartment.
So what would he keep in there, do you think?
A little jar of whiskey.
A jar of whiskey, just a very small jar of whiskey.
He doesn't need a lot.
There's a little barrel.
Yeah, you can just add a little straw.
Oh yeah, he doesn't need one of those beer caps. He just puts it in there.
What helps as well is to add a bit of asymmetry to his entire pose.
Yeah.
Just This is the most hacky thing you can do. You're doing this and you're going like, hello. And now, suddenly, he's just rotated his entire torso.
The same thing goes for the eyes. Like usually people will look somewhere. It's very rare that you'll have someone who just looks straight ahead. Especially you see this with Renaissance sculptures. No one just looks straight ahead because that's creepy.
Yeah.
They always look to something.
Yeah. Let's try this. Or you can do like this if you want to make him a bit. See, this is my point, right? How important the eyes are. Screw the eyes up and everyone's going to laugh at you.
I think it was actually better before. He's
So-
a grandpa. I mean, he might also have been hit in the face.
It's just probably been hit a lot in the face, to be
Yeah.
fair.
But the asymmetry really builds character.
Yeah, it does.
And especially with these kinds of creatures, you can really exaggerate it. You see that with a lot of the Lord of the Rings characters, like the orcs from there. Their faces are just everywhere.
And the most important thing of all this is to add a mouth scar.
Yeah.
You can't have an orc which doesn't have a mouth scar.
Can't have any sculpt without a scar.
That is that is true. That's usually where Morton gives him massive amount of shit for adding mouth scars to everything, but I mean,
scars in general.
just you gotta have mouth scars.
You always have the classic scar, but it's always across the eye.
Yes.
For some reason, everyone gets hit in the face when they're doing scars. It's like Kratos from God of War. It's also in the eye. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also kind of new to ZBrush, but what's the best way to do like hair and clothing?
So for clothing, Marvelous Designer.
So not use ZBrush at all, actually.
Yeah. Don't sculpt clothing.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's
Clothing
really
is
hard.
probably one of the hardest things you can sculpt. There's like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 different kinds of folds, but with tension, gravity, if skin is hard to do, then cloth is very hard.
Yeah.
Marvelous
random.
Marvelous Designer is excellent for clothing. Marvelous Designer.
Yeah, that's a whole separate software. That's based on simulation.
Yeah.
While sculpting is based on you, and that's really really hard to do.
You can prototype in ZBrush where you prototype your fabrics and everything. That's super awesome. Like I did Baby Groot's costume for Guardians of the Galaxy, and that was all done in Marvelous Designer.
Yeah.
So it's super powerful software. Obviously, that was then brought into ZBrush and you sculpt it up and you tweak it in Maya. But Marvelous Designer is the base. For hair, depends on what you're doing hair for. You can totally sculpt hair. It's tricky, but you can sculpt it.
We have tutorial on that.
We do, yeah, we
We
do.
do.
So you can totally sculpt hair. But then you have things like XGen if you want to do realistic hair and not sculpted hair,
That's in Maya.
which is in Maya and it's free because it's Maya. You have Yeti, which is another software. I don't know how many people use Yeti anymore because XGen is getting really powerful in Maya. Then there's things like hair cards if you're doing hair for games instead, where you would have like a plane. It's just like a plane that wraps around the head, and then you would just have textures with alphas on it. So that's another way to do hair.
Yeah, if you want to be a character artist, I highly recommend that you look into Marvelous Designer.
Yeah.
Because you really, really don't want to sculpt that from scratch. Because it's just not going to look very good. I know I had a friend of mine. He's been at Pixar for like 20 years, and very very good modeler. And even he was like dreading sculpting it. He would just avoid hair and he would just avoid cloth in general because it was so hard. This was before Marvelous Designer existed, but now everyone just uses Marvelous.
Like if I had to do like a Renaissance style sculpture with like a little penis cloth and everything, I would probably just sim that in Marvelous Design. Take the sculpture in there, just put like little drapery on top, and then yeah.
This is also why we don't do official ZBrush talks, because we're terrible spokespeople for ZBrush. So how do you sculpt it in ZBrush? You use a whole separate software. So how do you do alphas in ZBrush? Yeah, we use Mari for that. So we're terrible spokespeople for that. Use your software. Use the software to its strength. ZBrush's strength is exactly this. There's basically no other software in the world which allows you to do this as quickly as this. But don't use ZBrush for everything. If you're dealing with texturing, do it in Painter or in Mari. If you're doing cloth, do it in Marvelous Designer. If you're doing retopology, for the love of God, don't do it in ZBrush.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, we just kind of go in ramble mode sometimes, so you guys got to stop us.
Or don't.
Or don't. It's really fun to sculpt with no symmetry as well, because you just get so much more character to it. And this is kind of my default way. You move the shoulders to one side, you move the head to one side, and you move the eye to one side. It's a cheap one, but it kind of works.
Yeah.
You just get a lot of character to it. if you're doing something where you're spending more than like 45 minutes on it, then you probably want to, think a bit more about the pose. I often just go into the pose myself and take like selfies, because that works.
Or get me to do it.
Or get Morten to do it. Morten's taken a lot of photos of me for questionable characters.
Yeah. One thing I would really recommend is if you know any animators, get your animator friends to help you with posing. We've both done that a lot. Just because that's what they do. And they are pretty good at it.
Yeah.
So, like, instead of you trying to approximate, okay, how would this look when it's posed, ask an animator to do like a quick paint over, like how would the gesture be, because it can be super useful.
Yeah. So reaching a point now where we could literally sculpt on this forever. So we're just going to be sculpting like a few more minutes on it, just refining a little bit more. But you really just reach a point where you can just take this up, where you subdivide it once more. Maybe it's already 2 million. It's pretty good. But you're just going in and refining it. You're going over every single surface. And that was to somebody's question before about like how do you go from the clean to the mid? You just go over it. This already has a lot of mid frequency to it.
Yeah.
It's rough, but like all the scarring you hear, this is mid frequency. So it's rough, but it's there. It's hinted at. And once it's hinted at, then you just go in and you just refine it.
And just fill in the blanks.
Yeah, fill in the blanks. So the hard part of these sculpts is not to go from this to like the final. The hard part for me is always to get to this level.
Yeah.
Because now the design is kind of done. Everything is kind of there. The rest is just you just go in and you're just like refining everything. Yeah,
sure it doesn't need any more scars.
Now that you mention it, I'm very tempted to make a little straw thing from his skull.
It's like a pina colada or something.
Yeah.
Oh, you could 3D print that. It's like, yeah.
Isn't there like a primitive? Yeah, there is.
Insert straw brush.
Yeah, let's see if we can do that.
It's important to have fun when you're sculpting.
Okay, let's see if we can do that. Yeah, I'm sort of wasting everyone's time now, but you guys are just gonna have to deal with me making a little umbrella for his head.
It's all part of creature.
Yeah.
Stuff.
This is very important, very academic. Okay. And then we take these two, and then we merge down, and then we put this little thing.
That looks like a weird mushroom.
Yeah, it does look like a weird mushroom.
Whatever.
Okay, we're almost there. Final touches.
This is the high frequency detail.
Yeah. Nice.
There you go.
It's so that he doesn't get sunburnt. So cool, we're basically done with our sculpt now.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I might cut out the last part.
Nah.
Alright, so that's basically it for all of our lectures now. We've gone through a lot of different things: mid-frequency sculpting skin, remember makeup, remember pina colada hat, observation. We hope everything is kind of coming together and that you have like a framework for where you can go from. We showed somebody. Let's see if it's still open. It is. We on hub.flippednormals.com we have a guide which is about becoming a character artist.
Yeah.
This just has a bunch of tips, a lot of stuff we covered here. It has some study guides, basically how to do it.
It's a free article, so feel free to check it out.
Yeah.